You or me?
You.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to True Crime Tuesdays on the Girlfriend Hour. I'm your host, Rachel Faust. Let's get weird.
Yes. Welcome back to another True Crime Tuesday. Today we are going to be talking about an ex-Baltimore cop. So this case kind of hits close to home. And I don't know, it's pretty horrific. And some of the stuff that I found in the research, accidentally was like, wow, this guy was a real freaking problem.
Hmm.
Like, yeah. So I'll let Rachel do what she does
All
and
right.
let's get into
This is
it.
like I had said, I think when we talked about, I don't even know what episode, but I lived next to a crazy neighbor for a couple years. And so a lot of this stuff like made like my blood like just totally like boil. I'm like, when all that stuff was happening with her, it was like I felt like I lived there for 100 years because this woman just like terrorized us. So like a lot
Yeah.
of this stuff was like, oh my God, like um when you talk about like neighbor crime and stuff like that, there wasn't a lot of help from the police unless something happened. So it was
Yeah.
like until somebody does something like crazy or somebody's dead, like you really can't do anything about it.
Which is
So
terrible because, especially in this case, I mean, without giving anything away, I mean, look at how things turned out with this specific case. And so that's why that show, Fear Thy Neighbor, just it gives me like the heebie-jeebies. Because like I will say I've been decently lucky with like my neighbors in a lifetime so far. The only bad neighbor we had was there was an older lady in our apartment complex, and I got somewhat close to her. Like she was really welcoming, and sometimes I would spend time with her here and there, and like because Matt was on the road, so I was like, we'd have dinner, or and she was really cool. But then like she started to like get weird and was like trying to like drive a wedge like in between me and Matt, and she was like literally like I'm not there, and Matt would be like home during the day because like he's off from work, and like she would like go out there and she would be like how are you, and like would talk to him and he would be like, oh, I'm good. And she's like, I don't even remember how like the conversation transpired, but Matt was like, hey, like he just essentially said to her, can you like not like kind of like tell like broadcast to people that like I'm a police officer, like he's just like he likes to keep things low key and is and so that somehow like set her off. And she was like, you don't know your wife, you don't know the things that she does. And I was like, what am I, like a lady of the night? Like, I'm like, what do you mean the things that I
wow.
do? And Matt was like, that was the creepiest fucking thing I've ever heard. And she was like, you don't know what she tells me. And I'm like, what did I tell you? I'm like, we literally have dinner like once a month, and like I'm like, what, complained about my family? You don't think my husband's heard that?
Oh my
I'm
God.
like, everybody complains about their family or like their freaking like life drama. I'm like, that's not breaking news. Like, and she was like, she got weird with it. So like that was the only time where I was like, thank God our house opened up when it did, because like that's when she got like really bad, and like she got weird. And it was like Matt was like, I feel like she's like trying to like drive a wedge between us. He's like, if I didn't know you and you weren't as transparent, he's like, sometimes like too overly transparent. He's like, I would be like a little concerned. He's like, but she was like just being really strange. And so we got out of there. But that's like an apartment. And if you think about like neighbors, like some people, when you move into a house, that's a process. And if you're not renting, like that is not an easy situation to get out of. So that's scary. And like you don't want to
We
be on
were
like bad terms.
when we were selling that house, we didn't even put like a for sale sign in the yard. Like it was really low key. It was really like hurry up
Like
in and
don't find
out.
out where we're moving to.
Exactly. Cause I was like, she's gonna try to come over here and do something stupid. And I almost was like,
Oh, you
hopefully
mean
this
like Step Brothers stupid?
yes.
It
Yep.
was the asbestos.
Yep. Yep. So I was
That's
expecting her to do
terrible.
like something terrifying like that, but she had been arrested off of our property before like that kind of did it. And then she was like silent for like a while. And then we were like, okay, like we were gonna sell the house. And I was like, I almost want to like write a letter and leave like the case numbers and everything like under the floorboards or like in a
Just
cabinet.
something for like the next
Like,
family.
whoops, like if you just, but apparently those people were a little odd themselves buying the house. I wasn't there at closing, but
Well,
maybe they're BFFs now.
they
So
like found
they found
a
each other.
mutual psychoticness. So, well,
All right.
that's terrifying.
It was a terrifying couple of years.
Oh my gosh.
All right, so let's get into this crazy neighbor story and the unfortunate murder of Mark Xander. So the animosity between the Richter family and the Xander family was before they even moved in next to each other, so they say. So they were moving into a neighborhood in Stevenson, Maryland, which is only an hour from us.
Not far.
Yeah. So Charles Richter, aka Pete, and his wife Barbara built their home in this neighborhood next to a home that was owned by Mark and Diane. So in 2011, it was said that the two households had been living next to each other for about 14 years. But as their house was being built, there was vandalism that happened to the Richter's house. And so they were then blaming, this was like $20,000 of vandalism. So they were blaming the two sons of the Xanders because they had two younger sons. And so the authorities really did nothing about it, but there was no proof of vandalism. So they were pretty much just blaming the two boys next door on this
Which I
one.
don't think, like, honestly, it does kind of sound a little crazy because, I mean, if you kind of get the background, which we'll get to, like, on this family, it seems like, I mean, you can't really count anybody out of doing anything, but at the same time, it seems like they were a pretty well put together family. And, like, as we kind of find out, this guy had, I think he's been a much larger problem to not even just this family, but multiple people. So it's kind of you'll see it's kind of a it's not a them problem, it's a him problem for sure.
A him problem. And I can
Yeah.
only imagine like the chaos he caused, like when he was a police officer. Like, can you imagine like probably the things that he got away with, which
Well,
is
and that's what scares me when I think about that. I'm like, he's probably one of those guys that gives that's probably the reason why my husband is very low key about like he used to when we dated, he would tell people that he was a garbage man. I'm not kidding.
well, fine.
He's like, if
Oh,
they ask
God.
you what I do, he's like, you tell them I work for the town. He's like, you tell them I'm a garbage man. And I'm like, why? I'm like, because I came from such a proud police family. I was like, you should be like prideful, like and happy. I'm like, you worked hard. And he's like, no, he's like, because there's
Yep.
people out there that don't feel the same way. And I was like, what a shame. But then you look at assholes like this and you're like, well, thanks a lot, micropeen.
There we
The
are.
return of the
It is-
micropeen.
If you're playing Girlfriend Hour bingo, you can check off
That's the
micro.
free space.
So they were moving to Stevensville after he had retired from the Baltimore police, and this was kind of going to be their like retirement home, their forever home. And in his past, it said that he had a couple things, minor things like trespassing, but he didn't have a huge like criminal history at the time that they were like meeting Mark Xander and his family. So I'm like, you're already like catching yourself there. You have trespassing like charges on yourself there.
Well,
So
he carried a video camera everywhere, which in itself is kind of trespassing on people. That's like infringing on like
yes.
people's, I don't know. It's one thing if you take like a video with like your phone like here or there because your neighbors are being a little sus, but I feel like if
Oh,
you're
we had
carrying
a whole album of like videos and pictures, and like we were just compiling all this stuff because it was gonna be like, we're gonna this is it. You gotta save the evidence here.
oh
Um
Lord.
I, so the Richters and the Xanders lived next door to each other and shared a property line. And the Xanders were far from the only neighbors that had issues with Charles Richter. And it was only him. It wasn't his wife, but his wife did, push come to shove, like back him up. And I'm just like, bro, if you're doing stupid stuff, I'd be like, nope, sorry. Like, I'm not involved with
But
your.
if you think, okay, but the way, so I thought about that, but at the same time, I was like, I always think of like playing devil's advocate. If she had to live in a house with this man, so he's like this to the general public. People,
Exactly.
and sometimes people, so I'll get to this later in the podcast, but some of the things that I found just accidentally on comments of things, like people he didn't even know, like
Mhm.
he was like this. So can you imagine being like living in a home with him when he's comfortable with you? Like,
Yeah,
so I wonder if like she just kind of backed his play out of like fear sometimes. Like this
maybe.
guy is a, or maybe she just
Like,
also
I gotta
was
play it cool because
one
she.
screw loose. I mean, I don't know. Math
So
ain't mathin'.
yeah, not right. This guy is definitely not right. So one of the neighbors was quoted as saying, he sued just about everyone on the street. He drug everyone on the street into court, including me. A couple people moved because of him. And I'm like, well, that sounds about right. So he would call the police because kids were playing in the street. They were being too noisy. Anything that would land on his property. So the police would do little to nothing because it was just minor things. And you can't just go back off of like somebody's word of like, oh God, like the children are playing.
It's petty
Um,
crime. Like it's not even like can't even
that's
call
not
it
even,
crime. It's
that's
just
you being
like,
annoying. That's you being
yeah.
a nuisance to everyone.
Like if you're really that miserable, like maybe you should like instead of building a home in a community neighborhood, you should build a bomb shelter out in the middle of Montana.
Mhm.
Yeah, with like soundproof walls.
So this is getting to your portion of all of that caused him to start carrying a video camera around with him and taping his neighbors. So that just caused like so much hostility between him and the neighbors. And so that's what he was like protecting himself with. He was going to record everything to protect himself. And I'm like, you are a creep.
And he
And
like just held on to it too. Like I that part like just I don't know. There was a certain part where it's like I understand, like I said, if you about your phone or something, you record certain evidence, but like whenever like a human being, he's like a ring camera.
yeah,
Any
you're just
type of
walking by.
movement and it's
Motion.
like rolling the film,
Yep.
literally. And I'm just
Get,
like,
get this on
how like
video.
if yeah, I'm like if I'm pulling in my driveway and I see you have a video camera on me every single time I come home, it starts to get creepy. And like there's no, it's not justified.
So like he was angry with authorities that they weren't doing anything about his, complaints. Cause at this point, it's just complaints. It's, the kids are playing and, people are going about their day and nobody's doing anything. So he also, this was fun, he tried to run for sheriff for the county twice and he failed both times. So, the people
Which
were too fond of him.
so that's actually perfect because I want to read this comment that I accidentally found. So I don't know if you found this, but somebody, when I was doing research, somebody on Flickr posted a picture of him. So they posted like a photography worthy like picture of him smiling with a hat on, and I guess it was at the place where he ran for um sheriff. And so the person wrote like captioned all these pictures like oh at the tea time and da 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 and like all these nice pictures. Soon as you get to his pictures it says do not vote for Pete Richter. And it says I was walking through the tea party on the bay with my camera when this man said take my picture, so I did. Then he told me when he wins the election for sheriff, I will have this photo. I told him that his opponent was a good friend of mine and I was working on his campaign. He told me my friend was a politician and that he, in quotations, Richter, was a cop's cop. This man then went on to tell me how corrupt my friend was and how his agency had falsified reports, etc. I asked where his proof was and he said he had it. He probably did in his 1,000 case file boxes. It said, I told him that as a retired officer, I know that false allegations are a dime a dozen. He asked where I retired from, and I told him. He then mentioned a fellow retired officer friend of mine and called him a sissy. I told him I worked with and have known this man for over 20 years, and he was not a sissy. He repeated his description and went on to tell me how his friend also falsified reports and lied. I told him that if he had proof of this, in quotations, I do, he should go public with it. He then told me that He then told me that, well, we know how the courts are. He went on to, that doesn't even make sense. He went on to denigrate the Prince George's County Police and then called the state police a bunch of sissies. I told him that there were bad officers here and there, but he was painting with a broad brush and that I did not consider him a cop's cop. He became agitated and aggressive and said, "You're not a cop's cop either." I told him he knew nothing of me, so his name calling made no sense. As I began to walk away, he reached out and tapped my arm and began to rant again. I firmly told him to keep his hands off of me, and I walked away. How does this man expect to lead a police agency when all he does is bash the police? But that's just my opinion. So he posted this just as like a one-time picture of him. Just he was just like, "Hey, take my picture," and had this whole altercation. And this guy was like, "Okay, do not vote for this psycho." And somebody had commented, "Well, you certainly got a picture of him just like he asked you to do." People were like, "Ha, great pun, didn't expect this." And then basically like people just kind of were like commenting, and then somebody, the same guy, or not somebody, the same guy who posted this posted the update about an altercation he ended up having with his neighbor after it happened, to let people know, like, hey, this same guy that I photographed literally got into this altercation with his neighbor. So I figured that was the perfect time to tell you about that, because that was one of those things that I accidentally found. And I was like, that's crazy. Imagine being that guy and having this run in with him and being like, I literally like met a murderer.
This like cements the fact of like he's not quite right.
No, it also cements the fact that when they say that on average you meet like 3 to 4 like murderers a day and you don't even know it,
Mhm.
this definitely solidifies that as well.
Yeah. Uh, this guy.
So general public, somebody he didn't even know, but just because he didn't agree with like his view,
Mhm.
he like he was very what's that word, like provoking, but like also like he just kept engaging him. So like when somebody was like shutting it down and like drawing a firm boundary, instead of just saying, okay, this guy pissed me off like a normal human being, and like walking away and then having an argument with yourself in the shower with all the things you should have said like a normal person, he like kept, like, he was persistent, and it's like that's not
Well,
normal.
that like their opinion is right, so they have to keep like digging it at you, and it's like, okay, got it, cool, like,
And that is
and then you
definitely
walk
not a
away,
cop's
and it's like,
cop.
okay, we get it, like
Not a good, not good character traits for a cop, period. Like you got to
that is
have patience.
that is crazy to
Yeah.
me, like.
Yeah. That got
So
me.
kind of getting back into it, in 2001, the Xander home caught fire. And so other neighbors, alerted the family. They were getting everyone out. There were no injuries, but the house was a total loss. And so later they came to find out that the fire was because of mulch that had combusted, but neighbors were a little suspicious about that. Um, they were even more suspicious when not longer later another house on the block caught fire, mulch to be blamed because
Suspiciously from mulch.
yeah, just the mulch that catches on fire and just combusts randomly.
And honestly,
The
as a detective, like, did you check into the mulch? Like, hey, what brand mulch did you buy? Because if they were 2 bags of similar mulch, okay, I'll give it to you. But
just
if you
mulch in
got
general.
two mulch fires on the same block, different bags of mulch, I would be like, the only common thing here is this crazy ass neighbor.
Mhm. So the second fire didn't completely destroy the house, but the Xanders, chose to rebuild their home. Um, So their next problem was that the Richters and the Xanders had previous issues over the Xander's dog. And so this is one that kind of like reoccurs. So he was claiming that the dog crossed the property line and he would hold on to the dog until he called the cops because, you know, big issues here, big issues. And I just can't, you know, I love watching On Patrol and Live PD and cops and stuff like that. I love that stuff. And the amount of people that just call over, hey, that person, they're my neighbor and they looked at me weird. Can you do something about it? I can't imagine showing up to that and being like, you called the cops because of this. There are like other issues going on around here. And you're like, oh my God, like something's going on. Like just the
Like I had to
stupid.
drive 30 minutes out here to
Yep.
freaking
Billy Bob with no
Timbuktu.
shirt on that's having an issue
Yeah.
with the neighbor. Nobody ever has a shirt on. That's my
But
favorite part.
yeah, but my response time, that people complain about is going to be 20 minutes the opposite direction because I had to come here and make sure that your neighbor wasn't looking at you weird.
Yep. It's
So,
like, oh, they keep looking at me. I'm just like
yeah.
that. This is just this useless stuff of like you're taking up people's times for your own stupidity. So the Xanders also claimed that Richter had learned this special whistle that Mark had used with their dog. And so the dog would listen to that whistle, and it was believed that Richter would use that to lure the dog onto his property. Like, what a schmuck.
He was a piece of crap. Anytime animals get involved, and I know that you're gonna feel very similar to me on this, like
Yep.
I just when I initially first like saw this specific episode on Fear Thy Neighbor, I was always so terrified when I saw the dog getting involved because I'm like, what is he gonna do? Like he had me so on edge, and I'm like, let me tell you something. If my neighbor was that crazy to hold my dog on site,
Like,
on
heck,
site.
nope.
I don't care if you want to
I'll
arrest
down
me,
there.
you're getting a shovel to the face. And then I'm gonna pull a Step Brothers and this is gonna keep coming back to Step Brothers. This make me think of it. I'm gonna bury you alive. I'm like, this is your fault. I'm gonna bury you alive. Don't mess with my dog, dude. Like
Mhm.
that.
That's
That's
too far.
immediate grounds for murder.
Yeah. And you know, people that like mess with animals and stuff, like that's a
It's a
serial
red
killer red flag.
flag. Red
So
flag.
on April 3rd, 2011, Mark was outside with the dog and he was trimming some bushes that were near the property line shared with, Charles Richter, of course. And the authorities would receive a 911 call from Richter, who had reported that he and his neighbor had gotten to an altercation. So it was unclear to them if he had said that he had shot Mark, or he didn't give any kind of like, hey, I had an altercation with the neighbor. It was unclear that, he had shot him. So they weren't too clear on the details of this. When the officers did arrive, he was face down on his own property, dead from a gunshot wound to the back. So he had a pair of hedge trimmers in his hand, and they would find Richter sitting outside of his home holding a handgun. And so it kind of started with Richter telling the authorities that the dog had come to hit the property. He had grabbed a hold of the dog, intending to contain it in his garage to call authorities again, because, that's a huge problem. And Richter claimed that Mark followed him onto the property into his garage and attacked him from behind. And so then, he's talking about this struggle that ensued, and he had it all on camera, and Mark was trying to get the camera from him. So at some point, Richter shot Xander because, that's a typical response of, I'm just going to shoot you over things.
But it's like a bullet in the back. Like he clearly wasn't pursuing you. And this comes back to why I thought that comment was so interesting, because when I saw that person's description of this man on that Flickr picture, the part that I keep coming back to is how when this person had said their words, they said their piece, and they turned to walk away, he continued to pursue him. And it's like, this seems like habitual behavior for this guy. So it's like you find this man who has no history of being aggressive, has no history of, truthfully never really engaging him, but always being engaged by this Richter guy. And it's like, and he has a bullet in his back. So, I mean,
And
that
detail.
speaks volumes. And you know damn well if I was able to kind of find that Flickr comment in like 5-10 minutes, you know, detectives and police have way more technology and insight to find some of these things. And there's got to be some sort of trail to his behavior and like the habits that he had, personality wise, character traits. Like they're going to evaluate all that. Is it
Uh,
Peach?
yes, it
Peachy
is.
Peach.
So Charles Richter was taken to the police station and questioned, and a search warrant was issued for his home. So this gives me like heebie-jeebies and chills at the same time. So in his garage, they found a picture of the Xander home after it was burnt, and the phrase, "The Lord works in mysterious ways, and what goes around comes around," was written on it. Like, what?
Son
What?
of a bitch.
Yes.
You
I was
just
like,
knew. You
you
knew.
you just nailed yourself right then and there. Like, sorry.
I thought
Um,
what was creepy was like the copious amounts of just footage and pictures and files. Like,
so a
just,
lot of after we kind of wrap this up, I have a press release from the I think Queen Anne's County police on here um about some things that were found as well, which is
I was going to say, I think I saw the same thing you did. It's pretty bad.
yes. Yes. So at the police station, this guy is then, the evening of the shooting, he's complaining of like chest pains, onset chest pains when you're in trouble. And he was taken to the hospital and then released 2 days later, where he was taken back to the police station where he was arrested and charged with the shooting of Mark Xander. So at his trial, he would be claiming self-defense. He would claim the story that Xander attacked him. But it just,
Well, and the richest thing too that really like pissed me off is what a complete narcissist this guy was and how much that showed in the trial, because he tried to say, if I read it correctly, and don't quote me on this, so I was reading and the actual court documents. So the reason that so on December 19th, 2014, Richter filed a petition for post-conviction relief in the circuit court, in which Richter alleged ineffective assistance of counsel. So basically what I interpreted this as, and I'm not an attorney, I don't really know like court lingo, but Richter's lead trial attorney, Gordon Tabak, had passed away before the post-conviction hearing. And the circuit court heard testimony from Kenneth Mann, Esquire, who was a part of Richter's trial defense team. Mr. Mann had known Mr. Tabak for approximately 30 years prior to Mr. Tabak's death. And they basically, I think from what I had read, was they were trying to say that Mr. Tabak was not like coherent, I guess is the right word. Like he was trying to say like that Richter didn't get like a fair hearing, and that he felt like it was ineffective assistance of counsel because he like was having like pain in his hips and difficulty, like basically all this bullshit. And it turns out like even Mr. Mann was like, Mr. Tabak was lucid and coherent until the day that he died. And there was nothing wrong with Mr. Tabak's like mental processing during his trial. And Richter himself testified that he was satisfied with Mr. Tabak's services until the jury returned its verdict.
I don't think you
So
can redo at that point.
and that's the whole thing. So that's kind of what pissed me off. And I was like, what is this douchebaggery? So he basically, I may have gotten that mixed up. Forgive me, because like I said, court documents melt my brain trying to read some of this. But from what I understood is, I guess that he was like, okay, 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 I like this guy. This guy dies. They bring another guy in. And then he's like, no, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's terrible. He was incoherent, was not lucid, was bad. The guy died of cancer, and he was essentially trying to say that his cancer affected like his judgment, is what I took from it. And they were like, no, there was nothing wrong with his mental processing. And the only reason you're saying this is because they found you guilty in like 30 minutes. Like, so like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's just, yeah, our man's thought he could get a redo.
Absolute piece of work. Like, I just, of course,
Nuts.
another person that's just like nuts. And it's just like, what's wrong with your brain? Like, come on,
Yeah.
man.
And they
But like,
shot him down, man. They
yeah,
like they shot down of that freaking petition. They were like, nope, nope. Like there was nothing wrong. They were like, you even testified that everything was good. They were like, get the fuck out of here.
yeah, nice try.
Yeah.
So prosecutors would claim that there's no way that his story was true. Of course, that would have been different if there was actually a video of the recording, which he tried to tell like officers, like it's all on camera, like the whole altercation. I was videoing the whole thing. And of course, there was no video. And the only thing that had been reported prior to that April day was a reference to the fact that there was a 20-minute video that Richter he took after the shooting where he told the story of the alleged altercation and was claiming self-defense.
But he has like every video of every minute for the last 14 years up until the day of this altercation, and then just
Yep.
conveniently.
And then you're just recording your story of it was self-defense.
I honestly, I hate to say this, but I think he may have. We're gonna have to that podcast I tell you I listen to, Tooth and Claw. They have like every time they like talk about an animal, they create like a ranking system, and like who could like measure up to like what, or they like do comparisons. This is one of those moments for us, so we're gonna steal an idea from them, and I truly think he just knocked Niels, is it Nielsen?
Black Panther.
Black, yeah, I'm gonna just call him the Black Panther because that's his nickname. I honestly think that this guy is so like just psychotically idiotic that he knocked the Black Panther out of his dumbest criminal spot. Like, I
I
just
don't know. I don't know. This guy was a little more calculated with his stuff, where that guy was just like,
all over
hey,
the place.
try this tonight. I don't know. I don't know if he
Couple
goes
desk
above or
pops, a couple
below.
ammonia. Yeah, I guess this guy didn't really spray ammonia in his eye. But how are you gonna shoot somebody in their back and then like
So it was
literally like
self-defense.
these police raid your house and you have like just boxes and boxes and boxes of 14 years of footage and like but just coincidentally like you don't think the police are gonna be like, that's weird, you've recorded every single minute of the last 14 years, but the
That's
day that
just
you shot somebody on the back, there's no footage.
so that was like one of the things is like the investigators um it was not self-defense because when a victim is shot in their back, it's not self-defense. When a victim is shot in the back, it shows the victim was no longer coming towards the other person, and it indicates that the person is no longer in danger as the person turned away from them. So the investigators were like, if there was a struggle, like
What about the hedge clippers? Nobody
that he
paid
was
attention to
holding,
that. Like
yeah, he was still holding the hedge clippers.
it'd be
Like he
one
could
thing if like you
be
shot
shot as
this,
self-defense.
yeah, like if you shot this guy in the chest and there might have been like a little nick or something from the hedge clippers, okay, you have a case. But
Yep.
like you shot the man's in the back and he's got fucking hedge clippers. Those things, have you ever seen hedge clippers? I mean, they're big. If he wanted to, he could have just stabbed this man in his neck.
I'm
Like,
not surprised. Like at one point, like at what point do you not snap? Like somebody, like I guess
yeah.
he would have called the cops because that's like his thing. But like at what point were we not like
Eat or get eaten, my man's. Just
It's
and be like,
wild.
and you know what I would do if I was him? I would have been like, whoop, my hedge clippers slipped,
Oops.
and there's
So
no ring cameras.
yeah, this was not Ring camera. Like everyone's got cameras
No.
these days. There was no cameras. So they also mentioned the lack of, blood. There was no trail of blood from where Richter was saying that he shot Mark to where he was actually found. So medical experts would testify that the damage from the bullet would have not allowed him to travel as it was immediately fatal. So there was no
Yeah.
way that he shot him in the garage and then he like lingered back to his yard.
Well, it was close range too, wasn't it? Like, and that's another thing that, like, again, I mean, maybe he's like number 2 spot, world's dumbest criminal, but like, if you're gonna shoot somebody at a close range, these people are highly trained to measure these things, and that's why it's called crime scene investigation. Like, they're gonna leave him there and measure every ounce, every evidence, every inch, like, you know what I'm saying? So like they're gonna see like there's a much bigger difference that if you shoot somebody from a distance and if you shoot them from a close range, and they're gonna know that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, runner up for world's dumbest criminal
Yeah, he
because
really he tried though. He tried with his story. He was like the biggest liar and the biggest, he was
so we
like,
got the
I'm
Black
gonna,
Panther and the cop's cop.
yeah, yep. So
Yeah.
on May 18th, 2012, after deliberating for 3 hours, the jury returned their verdict. So they found Richter not guilty on first-degree charges, but they did find him guilty on the charge of second-degree murder, which I don't know the levels like offhand, and the charge that would involve the use of a handgun. So then June 26th, 2012, he was sentenced to 20 years for the murder and 5 years for the gun charge, to be ran consecutively. He attempted to appeal his case, but failed.
Yeah. I mean, I
And
just don't understand how
12,
you can listen to all of this in a court of law and be like, oh yeah. And you know what got me though? So kind of again segue into something that I accidentally found. So there's a it's kind of like it's called Ken Island like pro boards, and it's like just a bunch of like political forums and people to kind of like discuss. So they basically there was a lot of people commenting about, well, what about this and what about this and well, what about this instance? And so they basically said that I don't know what KIO is, but I guess he used to attend these meetings, these KIO meetings. And this person said, as far as KIO, he took everything written very lighthearted and would never say anything bad about anyone who criticized him online. He would say even the wimpiest guy could be a bully online and found a lot of the writings amusing. He enjoyed controversy and would laugh about the things written about him. He attended a few of our functions and would never let you get a word in, as he informed you of all the corruption in the legal system. This whole thing makes you reevaluate people. And so somebody commented back to that and they said, Frank, I would have to disagree with you on this part to a degree. I too have met Pete at probably some of the same KIO gatherings you were at. He didn't always take this stuff lighthearted. He actually showed up at people's houses. He called certain folks nonstop about something they posted in response to his post, or would PM until he got a response. And then
like
if
a
he saw you in
Facebook like
public,
keyboard warrior. Like he's
yeah,
those
like but
people
like
on
he was,
Facebook that just can't stop.
and it comes back to that persistent behavior. So he said if he if he saw you in public, he'd bring it up again if he didn't get a response from any of your prior attempts. He threw fits about people bashing him on here when he went off on a tirade and was acting a little off. And then when he met others from KIO, he would bring up old stuff that people talked about him, trying to get them to agree with him. So he didn't take it all lighthearted. And a lot of the times he did take things personally. And basically was just saying that he was shocked when he heard all of this because everybody at these meetings, I guess, thought he was a little bit off, but never truly knew to the extent that he would go. And somebody kind of rebutted, and this is kind of what I'm getting to, is that you still have people who, listened to this case and still thought, well, maybe it was the neighbors that drove him to a snapping point.
Mhm.
And somebody said, I'm going to get bashed for this, but oh well. Is it possible that while Pete was on the edge, he was pushed over that edge by some on this site taunting him, plus the torment of his neighbors? What might seem like a little quip to you and I is a big deal to somebody with psych issues. Please don't say, well, if he had psych issues, he should have been in a facility somewhere. If that were the case, he would lock up a lot of KI residents. I'm not saying what he did was right, just that perhaps he was pushed to his personal limit. Thoughts? And then somebody was like, thoughts, ridiculous. And I mean, like, I get it. Like, I mean, psych problems are a very real thing, but this is like, again, behavior that has been displayed over and over and over and over and over and again. And like, at what point did the people or whoever that is, maybe even just his wife, that are close to him kind of say, hey, red flag, this is like not acceptable and is going to turn dangerous if you don't get, like, whether it's anger issues or PTSD. I mean, who knows? I'm sure, being a Baltimore cop, he probably saw some stuff. PTSD affects people in really, really weird ways, and we don't really understand too much about it. But not to go on like a tirade, but just kind of talking about how there are two sides to the coin here, where there are people that are kind of talking about the psychology of what he did and not justifying it, but saying that, hey, there may have been some like outliers here that kind of contributed to him kind of snapping. But what I found interesting, like I just said before, is that nobody came back to the fact that like maybe this man was like suffering from like some form of, it could have even have been like schizophrenia, or like, that paranoia, that, you know fear. Like, he would just get very insulted if people didn't like him or didn't, and like it sounds like he has a lot of like negative internal voices. So it makes you question, like, was he always like this? Because there was no research on like his earlier life or what he was like on the Baltimore police force. um so I don't know, I just had to add that in because it just seems like people who had exchanges with him or knew him in person, just in general community gatherings and things like that, did not have a good experience with him.
And so I wonder if like during the trial, if all of his like recorded like in 911 calls were on there. It's like, man, you like called 572 times about little issues. Like I wonder if all of it
14
was brought up.
years.
Yeah.
That's what gets me, is he did this, like, that's 365 days in 1 year, right? Multiply that by 14. And he was doing this almost daily.
Like it was almost like his weird, like creepy surveillance. Like,
It reminds me of that movie 13. Is it 13 cameras? Have you ever seen that?
mm-mm.
Oh, it's freaky. It's like this guy who's like obsessed with like watching people on like surveillance footage.
Oh my God.
And like, yeah, it's spooky. And that's what it reminds me of. Like, when I first saw this, I was like, ooh, he's got like 13 camera vibes. Like, it just,
It was like he was almost so paranoid that like he had to keep tabs on everyone, or like I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know if it was just because of like the proximity of just like it was, why was this guy bothering you so bad?
yeah. And honestly, like I said, I think what interests me the most is, you know, I don't exactly agree with whoever this person is that wrote that, kind of trying to get us to be like, he's a victim. Um, because I think plenty of us on a daily basis have been, taunted or pushed. I mean, like you, for instance, you had that lady who pretty much made your life a living nightmare, very clearly has psych issues, but like,
There was a
you know
lot
what
of
I'm saying? Like,
alcohol involved too with her on a daily basis. So
yeah. So who knows? Like, if this man hasn't been evaluated, who knows? Like, it could have been one condition. He could have had a nice little cocktail going on of like
a lot of
schizophrenia,
things.
PTSD, like, but the fact that he was he retired from the force. This is just an assumption, but like I'm thinking he probably was on the force for a relatively decent time in order to retire.
Mhm.
So there's no way, like knowing the police force the way that I know it from a personal experience, and again, different states, probably, I don't know, different peeps, but typically if somebody starts displaying red flags as openly and as transparently as he seems to have, I mean, the police force would pretty much be like, hey, dude, like, we have to get you some help or you're going to have to leave. Like,
Was
so
this like immediate that all of a sudden he was like, you know what, I gotta survey the neighborhood, or was he doing these things like before he even like retired, or was it
yeah.
this like retirement set off that it was like, oh, now I'm gonna just bother the neighborhood. I have all
Well,
this
and
time.
that was like what was on my mind too. Like I was thinking about it and I was like, I wonder like if he had issues and it just didn't like kick in until he didn't have anything to do. Because when I mean, when you're like a police officer, you don't get like it's just like nurses, doctors, you name it. Like you don't have a second to breathe. So this man goes from living that kind of lifestyle, having a very regimented routine, being out there, running on the force and doing his thing. And Baltimore it's a hard city, man, to work in. And so when you're coming from that to all of a sudden it's just like that's it. It's
Yeah.
just like calm suburban, is that the right term? Like rural-ish. I don't know. Like lifestyle, I wonder if it was like a shell shock for him and
Mhm.
kind of caused some psychological issues, or maybe things just emerged due to the fact that he wasn't keeping busy.
So then, this next little part is what like discredits like you'd like,
Ugh.
no, sorry, man, like you're done. So this was a press release from Queen Anne's County State Attorney's Office. So it says during the criminal investigation into the shooting death of Mark Xander on April 3rd, 2011, a search and seizure warrant was executed on the residence of Charles Pete Richter, who was later formally charged with the murder. As a result of the search and seizure warrant, evidence was obtained, prompting the Queen Anne's County State's Attorney Office to issue the criminal charges, charging allegedly that Mr. Richter was in possession of child pornography. The statute of limitations for the filing of these charges is 1 year from the date of the evidence being collected. Thus, these charges had been filed to meet the statute of limitation time requirements. As the Office of the State Attorneys has no comment to details of the charges, the possession of it, the charges were separate allegations from the murder charges that were pending against him. So while they were searching his home for all these things after, the altercation, that's what they were finding. And so it's just like, that's just like one of those things. It's just like, first of all, you never know who you're living next to. Plus you're too busy recording all these kids. Like, no.
That's fucking gross.
Like, how long was that going on for? Was that like a just onset kind of thing, or was like,
I
a
feel like when it comes to like pedophilia, that's something that I don't think that's something that like come just from like my experience in
doesn't happen?
healthcare and hearing just stuff. It Yeah, I feel like that's something that you're kind of like either kind of like that nature versus nurture. I feel like it's something that you either kind of learn at a young age because you were either sexually abused or you, I don't really know how to like not witness, but like you were traumatized as a child or didn't have that, specific bond that you needed with a parent, like, that environmental contribution to, so I feel like it either starts at a really young age or you're kind of just born with like that. And,
Just
yeah.
not
So that's definitely, I mean, clearly
release.
yeah, it makes you think like, and this is why I love to know, if you can find it, which sometimes it's so hard to find early life on some of these lesser known cases. But like, I feel like a big part of dissecting why somebody commits murder and kind of understanding the psychology behind it is knowing what their early life was like.
Mhm.
Like, what was their parental set, like, what was that like? Were mom and dad divorced? Was he raised in the foster system? Was there sexual abuse when he was younger? Things like that. And like Did he ever get help? Did he ever have prior, like while he was on the force, like we said before, did he have any incidences that were
We'll say that
claims
he had,
against him?
I don't know if it was when he was on being a police officer before, but it was like he had trespassing like charges and things like that. So that kind of adds up to his neighborhood shenanigans.
Mm. He's seriously a disturbed individual. And one of the other things that I was gonna share is were you gonna talk about like what Xander's wife kind of put into motion?
No, I didn't have that.
So when Pete was found guilty of second degree murder, um they basically were like, hey, like, like we just said, this was bad. This was not self defense. This kind of stuff should not happen. It shouldn't even be like an argument or any kind like up for discussion on whether or not, if somebody's shot in the back like that, like BS. So, whatever. So they dismissed his appeal, like we said. And then in the aftermath of Mark's death, Mark Xander, his wife Diane worked towards reform in Maryland's gun laws. So she wanted Mark's law to be passed, which would not allow someone to regain a gun permit if it was revoked once prior. So Pete, on the other hand, now has been serving his sentence at the Eastern Correctional Institution in Westover, Maryland. So those were kind of, he's still doing his time, and really praying it's not one of those cases. I think the judge had pretty much said like he is not somebody who can be rehabbed and kind of shut down any chance of parole at the time of the trial. But I think it's noble and honorable of his wife, of Mark's wife, sorry, to kind of be looking to pass a law like this. Because I do think if somebody has a gun pulled from them, I'm all for people having the right to defend themselves and use a gun responsibly, respectfully, and respect like how powerful of a weapon a gun is. And that it can be misused very seriously. But I also think that there does need to be a little bit better care when it comes to people who may have psych issues or present, with red flags. Like if you go to scan, their ID or their permit or whatever for a gun, and it shows that they already have a nick on their history, like that should be an automatic like, this is probably not the right person to be selling a very serious firearm to. And
Because if he like bought it secondhand off of somebody, he knew a
yeah,
guy like Facebook
and
Marketplace.
that's what's scary too. Like,
Facebook
it's,
Marketplace.
and I'm totally, again, playing devil's advocate. That's the hardest part about stuff like this. It's the same with drugs, alcohol. I mean, prohibition is the biggest example. Every time people are like yelling gun reform and they're like, just take guns away, I'm like, it's no different than drugs or alcohol because it, if people want it, it just makes the criminals more rich and more stealthy, and they're going to find ways to get what they need, and also make a profit off of it and get it into the hands of other people who want it. And it's sad, but hopefully if she does get Mark's law passed, it's just another, I guess, another little checkpoint that kind of helps, if we have people who are a security risk to those around them, or yeah. Like this guy was just a perfect example of like he probably should not, he should, I just, maybe he shouldn't have ever have gotten a gun.
Like we'll let him out and he can be live next to the neighbor that I had. They can just battle it out.
Seriously, they would
I would
have
love
a
that.
jolly old
They
time.
can battle it out.
Oi, I'm telling you, like I really hope like I just continue to be decent with the neighbors that I've had since my apartment horror story, because if I ever get a neighbor like you had, yeah, it's
It was
just not.
a lot. It was a lot.
And it was Peach born then. She was, right, right?
We only lived in because that was one of the things. I was like, I will not live here with a child and this crazy person because I will probably go
Okay.
to jail. So she
Yeah,
had
because
been,
that's what I was thinking. Like, how did you do that with Peach? Because I probably would have hit her. Like I said, I would have hit her with not Peach. I would have hit this lady with a shovel and been like,
yeah.
mm-mm.
So it was, I think, July when she was arrested. And then I had Peach in November, and by like March, we were moving out.
Okay.
So after she was arrested, like then it was quiet. So nothing after that,
She was like, oh shit.
yeah,
She's like, they're not playing around. I gotta stop with these alcoholic shenanigans.
dude,
That's
there was one
scary.
day. There was one day. And so it was just like a whole bunch of issues. So it kind of started that like they lived there in this house, her and her boyfriend. And these are older people. I'm not even joking. These are like 60s, 60s, 70s, like
60s
bothering
is an old Rachel.
okay, old.
70s, 80s. We're gonna say that they're in their 80s since she said they were old.
Okay. They were probably in their like 70s, like I don't
85s.
know, something. Something. So the land that we had got, we were putting a house on. And so she was like, oh, like I wanted to maybe buy that. Da 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 da. So it kind of started there. And then she'd linger over and like talk to Zach about like, she'd be drunk and he'd be like coming home from work at like late at night. And like she'd want to come linger over and talk to him. And he's like, I'm just trying to go to sleep. And like she kind of took that as like, oh my God, these like young kids don't want to be friends with me. And so she's just started all these like little things. Like she had these two dogs, and for my profession, I'm not afraid of dogs. I've never been afraid of dogs except for her one dog. Her one dog was not quite right. And he would charge you, he'd run over and growl at you and charge you. And I'm like, there's something not right with you. And so we put up
And your
a
dog.
yeah,
You
y'all
and
are
your
not
dog.
right. Something happening over there is not right. So we put up a fence, and then she took up like that was the biggest offense to her, that we put up a fence. And I was like, I'm trying to be a responsible pet owner, unlike you that just let your dogs wander around. Um, so that was a huge issue. And then it was like just these things she was making up. And then, she was upset. Like we got cameras and a security system. So, that was, it just was like her making up these like little things in
So she
her
took
head.
everything again, like this
Yes.
guy. She took
Yes.
everything very personally when it's
Yes.
just like, hey, I'm just doing home ownership shit.
I'm like, can you just leave us alone? There was one night that I screamed and hollered at her until I was probably like blue in the
You just say
face.
hollered. You sound
Yes.
like a southern lady. You're like, I screamed and
Ah,
hollered at that
screamed and
lady.
hollered. Yeah, I did. And I probably used every word in the book at her because I was so tired of it. And so the next day after that, she had this boyfriend. And this is so good. It's funny now. It was not funny when it was happening. I was home by myself. And all of a sudden I just hear like this screaming. And so I'm like, what the heck's happening? So he was sitting in, they had this like shed barn thing. He's sitting at the top of it with like some kind of like liquor, and he's just screaming. Morgan, when I told you he screamed the entire day, he screamed the entire day up there at us, at my
Why?
dogs, at everything. He would just like, I'm like, I don't know what crazy lady has told you, but like you're just playing into her like
Bro,
delusions.
that's when I would leave. Honestly, I'm too petty. I would drive around. I would go to every rehab
I was
AA facility,
afraid
collect their brochures, and duct tape them to
leave
her
the
front
house.
door.
I was afraid to leave the house because then, like the day before, it was him sitting on the property line cleaning this like bow and arrow. Like it was a huge thing, and the police wouldn't come out for that. This guy sitting on the property line, like threatening with us, like a weapon.
What is he, a
So
fucking Apache? He's gonna like spear you
exactly,
guys down with a fucking bow and arrow? What a
it's like yes. So we had this wonderful woman who reminded me a lot of Nana that lived on the other side of us, and
oh, this is a new woman. Okay.
yeah, so it was us in the middle, and then it was crazy person, and then it was the really nice lady on the other side. And so she walks over there, and I see her on the camera, and I was like, oh my God, what is she doing? She walks over there, and this is like 4 o'clock in the afternoon after he's been screaming since like 9 or 10 a.m. And she goes, you need to shut the F up or I'm calling the police. I can hear you in my house. And this was like the nicest, sweetest woman. Like she was
Made her
like so
fucking
enough.
snap.
Literally, I was like, oh my God. I was like, I can't even believe this. And it was just like chaos ensuing from them, like her doing little dumb stuff, like them shining a floodlight into our cameras, and like it was just a lot of things. And so then I don't know if she tried to like, if she was just trying to be like snarky, or like she just thought she could just come over and like be on our porch. Like if she, it was just like an entitlement thing, or a like, oh, watch what I'm gonna do. We were somewhere and the ring comes up and it's like there's a person on your porch, and I look and it's her, and my heart drops down to my butt. I was like, I'm gonna throw up right now. And she kept bringing over these plants and like putting them on our porch as like, I don't know if that was like the peace treaty here, but I would pick them up
They were
and
probably like some like foreign exotic like poisonous
I'd pick it up and I'd put it
poisonous
right in
plants.
the trash can. And I'm like, I hope you're watching me from your window because I know you like to do that. She would
Bro,
sit
I would
and
have taken a shit in the plant, like in the potted plant thing. I would have squatted down, gotten it on my ring camera,
put
taken a
a,
poop in her plant, and then delivered it back to her door and sent her the video.
like, you
Like,
left this on my porch. So
I'm
I
too
would,
Jersey for that kind of bullshit. Because I would like on day 2, I would have had a bat. I would have been like, listen, you either shut the fuck up or I'm gonna take your
back your head
kneecaps, and
off.
that's how this is gonna go. Like, oh man, I don't even know how you did that.
Oh yeah. And so she just kept doing that. And so we had all this stuff, and we had this letter and a text message and all of this stuff saying, please do not come over here. Like, do not come over here. Do not come over here. And that was the time that was the second time she'd come over to put a plant on our porch.
Did
Almost like
police tell you to put up no trespassing signs?
we did have those. Yep. There were those. There were
Because
cameras.
usually that's automatic grounds for like if she comes on your property and you have that.
Well, that was the police officer. I could have kissed him that night, and he was like, "You want us to arrest her?" And we're like, "Yeah." I was like, "I've been waiting for that." I'm like,
Hallelujah.
"Can you do it right now? Can I watch?" And it was like a whole thing. Like I remember, I can't remember how we found this out, but it took 2 officers to get her and get her
To
in the
Geeter.
wrangle up this little woman.
Oh man.
Oh
That's
yeah,
yeah, I'm telling you, I feel like we found a pretty good topic here because I truly feel like everybody has some sort of like crazy neighbor story. And
just like the relief, like when we moved into that second house, like just the relief of like, oh my God, like I can be out in my yard without somebody watching me from the window or screaming at me, or their dog's gonna come over and attack me. Like just the like I had been so stressed forever. Like,
so was that the house like when I came to get the mannequin? Was it that house?
I think that was our second house. This house
Okay.
is in Dover.
Oh yeah, no, I never went to Dover.
Yeah, this house is in Dover.
Okay.
You
Damn.
need to drive by sometimes.
Damn.
Take you over there.
Yeah, I want to see it now because I want to see
I'll
this
tell you
lady's
something
house.
secret when we're not recording and we're not live.
Okay. Yeah, for evidence purposes, we can't have this
For
information
for
out
legal
there.
purposes, this will be all. Everyone will just have to wonder.
Because if we're ever on Fear Thy Neighbor, because the
It,
neighbors fear
dude,
us now.
after all that happened, and then I saw that on ID, like when I would just let it run in the background, I'm just like, I sat down and I watched it and I was like, oh my God, like this could have been us. Like this is it.
See, this is when we need to.
So
Okay,
it
so
gives me like,
we're gonna come up with a script for our own show. It's gonna be Thy Neighbor Fear Us, and we're gonna establish
the ground
dominance,
rules here.
and it's gonna be how the neighbors flipped the script and absolutely mollywomped their fucking neighbors out of their bullshit. Coming soon to what is it on again? Is it Identity ID channel?
Identity.
Oh, I don't know. It's on one of these crime shows coming to you soon. Thy Neighbor Fear Us, starring Rachel and Morgan taking back their powers.
Morgan with a bat.
Oh, I don't play. I'm gonna set out some bear traps. If we're gonna listen, if my neighbor is gonna have fun with me, I'm gonna have fun with them. That's how this goes. The energy you put out is the energy you shall receive times 10. I believe in the tenfold. So you want to mess around? Okay. I'm setting out bear traps. So if your drunken ass comes stumbling over here, you're gonna be pulling back a nub, my
Barbed
friend.
wire.
Uh-huh. You want to leave plants? I'm switching the plants out with the most itchiest poison ivy plants. I'm gonna put them back on your porch so when you come to carry them over, have fun. Have fun with that itchy ass and chest and neck.
So this totally like this resonates with me. I'm glad I'm not dead
Yeah,
because
I'm glad you're not dead.
I'm glad I'm not dead and I'm not in jail. So there was one time
Seriously.
she saw me like getting in my car, and then all of a sudden she needed to stand in the road to like look at her house. And I remember like, you're kidding, right?
See, that's when I say 10 points. 10 points. I'm not even going to describe that. Those of you that know, you know. 10
Whoops.
points.
Didn't see you there.
Oh, must have been a deer.
Yep.
Small raccoon. No big deal. We could buff that out.
Oh god.
Uh, yeah, if you can't have a morbid sick sense of humor, you definitely don't belong on True Crime Tuesday. It's just a you probably should have put that at the beginning of this episode as a forewarning.
I love that you
This
did
is an after warning.
your disclaimer for the last time of like, oh, this is just, you know, you did it at the end, not even at the beginning.
I know. I always think of it after the fact. I'm like, that kind of came across a little murderous. I'm like, I should probably let them know that I just have a really listen, when you work in hospice for as long as you do and like healthcare and you become so desensitized. So just like everything really dark is like really funny. Like sometimes like I let a little jokey joke slip out and people are like standing there really quiet and I'm like, oh God. I'm like, I'm sorry. My trauma slipped out for a second. Sorry about that.
Exactly. Like literally, like if you listen to this whole thing and you're offended, here's the disclaimer.
Yeah, it's not a if you've reached the end of this episode, or if you've even reached the end of last episode, I do a disclaimer every single episode at the very end just to let you know that this is strictly sarcasm and morbid sense of humor. Although if somebody messes with my child or my dog, I would definitely set bear traps. Okay?
That's for everyone.
So, forewarning, if my neighbors listen to this, you guys are sweet little cherubs and I adore you. So, let's not change that. So, yeah.
Yep, that is
Well,
it.
we didn't get delusional on this one, so that's pretty good.
Be kind to your neighbors. Don't be a crazy person. Just do a little
Definitely
wait.
don't
You
drink and
know,
sit on the top of a little barn and
nope,
scream all day.
nope. Man, if he still has those, I'm gonna find them and I'll send them to you.
You really should, because I need to see that.
I remember like it just, ugh, like I want to throw up thinking about it.
I'm so happy you don't even like live close to them anymore, but that just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Listen, there was one night that we were for sure she was doing something to our side door that had like a sensor on it, like an alarm. So the only time it went off, and at like middle of the night, that's the scariest thing ever, to hear your alarm going off. So the alarm went off, and so we jump up, and I was like freaking out, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so it was like 2 3 a.m, and so like I let my dogs out so they could go like investigate if there's something happening out there. And so like
You
we didn't,
sent the dogs out.
yeah, I was like, go ahead, you guys, get out of here. So we're waiting for the police to come, and it was probably slow night because like 6 state troopers show up. They were like, it was a slow night or something, because they were like, we're all going. So they're like all in the backyard with their flashlights, and like the 2 women police officers come in and they were chatting with us and whatever. And you know, we had let them know like something's going on with the people next door, like something, you know, they're not right. And so eventually we got that like sensor fixed, but it was just like really coincidental that like all of a sudden, like middle of the night, and like the door was being like pushed on or something. So
No, I
that
think it
one,
was her.
that one, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think that's a red flag. I
They
definitely
were
think
looking
that
for
was
like
her.
any cut, because like I remember,
Did they fingerprint it?
no, but they were looking at the grass, like the grass was wet. So they were looking for any type of like anything in the grass that would kind of look like somebody walking.
Can I
Um
tell you I have a really so I mean you probably already know this, but I have a really animated like when I'm listening to stories, I like paint my own picture. And like all I picture is you've seen the movie Leprechaun, right?
I
Like the
think I've
scary
seen that.
movie.
Yes.
So like, well, I'm gonna send you a clip just to refresh your memory after this, but I picture like her like pushing on the door. Like I just picture little leprechaun, that nasty little like gremlin looking thing, and like her pushing on the door and then doing like that leprechaun run away because like she just he runs like a little like drunkard like gremlin, and I'm like, I could see that being her in the middle of the night thinking like, oh, it's a good idea, I'm gonna kick in their door and scare the shit out of them, and really she just like scares herself.
Yeah. That one was kind of a mystery, but I was like, that was the scariest experience of my whole life.
No, that would freak me out. That would I feel like it would freak me out at first, and then I'd probably get like unnaturally like Richter angry.
Mhm. It was
That's
just
gonna be
like
my new
thing
term,
after
Richter
thing after
angry.
thing. Yep. Thing after thing. And I was just like, this is too much here.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you moved because that just sounds like it was gonna boil over into a Fear Thy Neighbor episode,
Yes.
and
I am glad I am not on that show. I'm glad I'm not dead, and I'm glad I'm not in prison.
well,
So
I was gonna say, or would it turn into a Thy Neighbor Fear Us episode? Because I feel like it was coming to boils on whether it was you or the sweet old lady next to you. Somebody was about to snap and fold
yep,
this lady while she was in her clothes. Okay,
yep,
I'm about to fold your pants while you're still in them.
yeah.
That'd be
Just
you.
buy it back. We'll just go buy it back. And then we'll go over there and just cause chaos now. Like,
Hooting and hollering. Now that you got a good old Jersey friend that's ready for some scrappy behavior.
like, hey, you want to come over? I'll let you come over.
It's like shaking up a bee in a box and then opening it. Like it's thing one and thing two now. Just set us free. We're ready to wreak havoc. We have new ideas. That's the thing is when you have a problem and you have some time to sit on it, you come up with like really evil creative solutions to those problems, but there's always drive-bys.
Yeah, I've driven by before.
Can always drive by and just poop on our lawn real quick.
There you
It's
go.
it's not beside me.
No, nope.
I may be almost 30, but I still there's still a dog in me. Yeah,
And on that
it's not the
note,
kind it's not the fierce rabid dog that you're picturing. It's more of like a Taco Bell Chewini.
there we go. There
Yeah.
it
Might bite. Not sure though.
is. Wow.
All right. Well, I think we're starting to head down the delusional tunnel, but
And
I'm
before
actually
we get
having
in
fun. I'm
trouble,
having fun planning ways that we can make thy neighbor fear
oh,
us.
nothing is nothing is happening. This is
I would
not
say we could drive
real.
by my old apartment and go see if like the wench that tortured me still lives there, but I'm not even sure if she's still alive. She was pretty old. I hate to be like that, but I'm like seriously, she was
It's always the mean ones that live to be like 200 years
true.
old.
You know, that's actually a good point. There's a reason that like those witches and like cottages, not like the nice witches, like the mean witches that like boil little kids into stews, they're like
Yep.
200 years old. Ugh,
Hate keeps them alive.
like cockroaches. You just can't get rid of them.
Man.
I'm telling you, all for humor purposes. Disclaimer, disclaimer. It's the end of the episode with
Not be used
disclaimer.
in court.
Oh, well, this has been actually a really fun episode. We have, like I said, we have new ideas, so we're going to sit and ponder on those. But until next time, well, until tomorrow, because we're going to release this episode and
Well,
then we
next
have
time
another
tomorrow.
episode, and then we have another episode. So until tomorrow, everybody, let's
Get.
weird.
Sorry.
Oh, peace out, Cub Scouts. Bye.